Taction USA is your go-to source for crime scene and evidence collection supplies. Taction USA offers quality products all designed and tested by active duty first responders and investigators. With no minimum order, you can order as much or as little as you need. Ordering is fast with no hassle attached. Check out TactionUSA.com today and find the quality and quantity you need when it comes to crime scene and evidence collection supplies. That's TactionUSA.com, or look for the link in our show notes and Facebook posts. Hello everybody and welcome back to Crossing the Tape. This time a full story for you. First, sign the crime scene log and join myself, Brendan, and my co-host,
Hillary,
as we discuss a single solitary thread of evidence.
well, not a single solitary, but...
Well, it's still a thread.
True.
Threads can be long.
Yeah. Or many, or singular. I do want to note that this podcast is about a child murderer. So if you feel the topic is too disturbing, please stop listening and make sure you stay well.
Yes, and join us next time where we'll probably discuss something a little bit less awful.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, we talk about awful things.
The nature of this beast.
Right. This particular case, I will just introduce a little bit before we dive into it. But I hadn't really heard about it. It was until the show Mindhunter, which we were big fans of, the Mindhunter show on Netflix.
Bring it back.
Yes. And I did have the privilege, I should say, that to work with some of the actual FBI profilers that worked some of those cases. So it hits a little bit, closer to me, given that I know the people who worked this case.
Yes, you got to pick their brains a bit.
Yes. So, between the years of 1979 and 1981, the Great Atlanta area was taken aback by several murders of children. This case was fairly high profile and received a lot of attention across the nation, and the FBI was called in, those criminal profilers I mentioned, to assist with the investigation. Because at the time, apparently it was it would be shocking for any community.
Oh, yeah.
But even though Atlanta is a bigger city, bigger population, because there were so many child murders, I think it was particularly shocking.
Yeah, call them the big guns.
Right. This particular case was even featured, as I mentioned, on Mindhunter. The killer was caught, thankfully, but few people know the minute detail that helped close this case, which is why I wanted to discuss this one.
Yes.
If you don't already know, my experience is in crime scene investigation and forensics, and this particular case had a lot of forensic evidence, in particular, one or two things.
Yeah, we'll get there.
That made it tied up the best it could.
Yes.
So I was very interested in how this case came to be solved. So we're going to discuss the murders first, and as I mentioned, it's not fun. But I do like to mention the victims' names as a little bit of an honor to them. During those 2 years, Atlanta, Georgia experienced horror as child after child was found murdered. It is approximated that 29 people lost their lives during that time. Most were children. There were a few adults, which we'll get into some of the MO and all that. But the majority of the victims' bodies were children, and they were found in a stream or wooded areas, so remote areas. And I hate to say it, but body dumps.
Right.
Which is a high indicator, especially the serial murder. The first murders were committed in 1979. Edward Hope Smith was just 14, and Alfred Evans 13. They both vanished only 4 days apart from each other. Both boys were found with 22 caliber bullet wounds, and it was at this point the suspect was called the Atlanta Child Killer. So he was coined pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think it was because obviously the deaths were connected.
Right.
I mean, it's not a coincidence. They were both found. And I believe it was execution style, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another aspect of the case that kind of pointed out to investigators that this is the same person.
Yeah, this is the way he does this.
Right. But it gets interesting with his MO later on. Only 2 months later, Milton Harvey, 14, went missing. He had been on his way to run an errand for his mother, and he never came back. Harvey's body was not found until November of 1979. The last murder of 1979 did provide police with a lead. Yusuf Bell was only 9, and he was running an errand for a neighbor, which, we have to remind ourselves that in the 70s... Different time, kids ran around, it's not like it is today, unfortunately. I mean...
Can't run any errands anymore.
Well, I think it's sad, in a way, But a witness saw the boy get into a blue car. Bell's body was found on November 9th in an old schoolhouse, and from what I read, the schoolhouse was abandoned. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, it was still attached to a school campus or something.
Oh, okay.
And a janitor found him because the janitor was trying to take a leak somewhere other than the bathroom, but discreetly,
the bathroom.
And unfortunately found a little boy deceased. So that he was found abandoned in a schoolhouse, which is different from the first two.
Right. Not the same dump site.
No. Though the police knew about the blue car, they did not realize that the car was a potential link. So the witness mentioned that little boy got into a blue car.
Right.
Which I'm still why didn't police think we need to look for a blue car? Right.
Blue car. I mean, if all they could say was blue car...
Then I could see it being...
You can't stop every blue car in Atlanta.
No. But at the time, they didn't have enough. That's what we'll say, because that probably was it. They didn't have enough to realize that the blue car could have been a potential link to the murders of the other 3 boys. So this may have been, since thus far, the only similarities in the murders were that they were young boys. Mm-hmm. And that we have, 2 14-year-olds, 1 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old.
Yes.
So even there, the age is fluctuating a little bit. And with child predators, it seems like they usually have, unfortunately, a favorite age. Mm-hmm. So it appears that the young teens would be the age, but now we don't know because now we have a 9-year-old. Yeah. Unless the 9-year-old looked mature.
Possibly. Well, right, and I'm sure he's not specifically checking for ages as he's going about this.
So this may have, like we said, they weren't sure at this point. But we know Smith and Evans were shot. Well, it appeared that Harvey was strangled, which is an important thing to remember as we continue. In 1980, the murders continued, unfortunately. March 14th, Angel Lenar went missing. She was the first female victim. She was only 12, and her body was found in a wooded area.
So another change-up. Female this
time.
Yeah,
female. So now we've got same age bracket, but we have a different gender. She was strangled, and the other item of note that she had a pair of underwear that was not hers stuffed in her mouth.
Huh.
Unfortunately, the article I read, her parents had to identify whether that was her underwear or not.
God.
Just a few days later, Jeffrey Mathis disappeared. Mathis was only 11 and was also seen getting into the blue car like Bell. So now we have 2 sightings with a blue car.
Right. Kids go missing, there's a blue car afoot.
There were also suspects described, one being light-skinned and one possibly darker, but the witness couldn't verify race, age, really anything else. Just 2 males, blue car. Mathis's body was not found until almost 1 year later, and at that point the investigators could not determine the cause of death because too much time had passed. Right. And probably, I didn't find specifically where he was found, but I'm guessing it was outside.
Another wooded area outside, so the decomposition was probably well done and over with by the year later mark.
In May of 1980, Eric Middlebrooks, 15, vanished. He was found later with stab wounds, so now we have a new M.O. Mm-hmm. In June, Christopher Richardson, age 12, vanished from a public pool. He was found wearing different swim trunks than his own, and his cause of death was indeterminable also. So I think it's interesting that some of the victims their clothing is removed and then new clothing
swapped.
is...
Yeah.
There's
something to do with changing their clothes.
What I did notice with that one is that Christopher had, I believe, some kind of swim trunks on that were noticeable, like they were brightly colored.
Right.
So maybe that's why that
he was forced to change into something less conspicuous.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Later in June of that same year, Latonia Wilson, who was only 7, went missing. She was abducted, and when her body was found, they could not determine how she died. At this point, we now know there are 2 men most likely involved. They target children, and they drive a blue car.
Right.
So,
male, female,
yeah,
a wide span of age.
So at this point, investigators really don't have a lot to go on.
No.
But as time goes on, we get into more details. So on June 23rd, 10-year-old Aaron Weish went missing and was seen getting into a blue Chevrolet with 1 or 2 black men. So now we have another witness, a third one saying there's a blue car, but now we have a
specific make.
And this person said it was a black male, but
1 or 2.
1 or 2. So we still have a male.
Right. There's definitely a male with a blue Chevrolet.
A witness even stated the man she saw was a 6-foot, 180-pound black male, approximately 30 years old, with a mustache and a goatee. So far that's the best witness description we have.
Much more than before.
Aaron's body was found under a bridge, and it appeared he was thrown or pushed. In July, 2 more boys were taken and killed. Anthony Carter, who was only 9, and Earl Terrell, who was 10. Clifford Jones, who was 13, disappeared in August. His body was found, and he had been strangled. So now we have 2 that were shot, 1 that was stabbed, 1 thrown over a bridge, and we have 2 strangled.
Yes.
So, as an investigator, that's confusing. Mm-hmm. Especially if they believe... At this point, I don't know that they believe it's a serial killer. To me, I would think it was.
But that definitely feeds into the more than one person involved.
Yes, theory. Exactly.
Because usually they have a style of doing things and stick to it.
Right. So if there's more than one person, this would make sense with...
One guy prefers stabbing, one prefers shooting, and they dabble in strangulation, one of them.
Darren Glass, who was 10, went missing that September, and his body was found, and his body was never found, unfortunately. Charles Stevens went missing in October and was found the next day. He died of asphyxiation. Evidence from his body included 2 Caucasian hairs, pubic hairs, and dog hairs. Huh. And I think it's very good that back then they were collecting minute evidence, trace evidence, as it's referred to.
Well, with the number of victims, you can't leave any stone unturned.
But, that wasn't always the case back then. So I'm glad that, it's probably because the FBI was involved. There's a little more...
Slow down, took their time, got every piece of information they could.
The human hair was not Stevens. Mm-hmm. Aaron Jackson, who was only 9, vanished in November and was found strangled, so another strangulation. Patrick Rogers, 16, went missing in November and was found dead near a bridge. It appeared the killer or killers had patterns of behavior, though they varied. So again, as an investigator, that would be confusing. And as you mentioned, it would leave me to think there are 2, at least.
Yeah.
2 different suspects. In 1981, unfortunately, 8 more bodies were found. The victims' names were as follows. Luby Geeter, age 14, Terry Pugh, 15, Eddie Duncan, 21, and then he was the first adult victim.
Wow.
Larry Rogers, 28, John Porter and Jimmy Payne, both 21, William Barrett, 17, Nathaniel Carter, 27, and some of these victims knew each other or had crossed paths. And what I saw in my research was that some of these, like the older ones, had crossed paths with some of the first victims.
Wow.
So that's interesting too. All this time has passed. And
They're able to connect these.
They're able to
adult
connect.
victims.
Yeah. So, how did the police catch the killer? We will find out after we hear a word from our friends at the National Investigative Training Academy. Interested in investigation and security? Whether you are already a professional or you are in the beginning stages, take all of your classes at the National Investigative Training Academy. Choose from over 200 courses, all written and taught by experts in the field. The National Investigative Training Academy, or NIDA, has offered high-level investigative and security training for over 12 years. Like live classes, NIDA has those too. Sign up today for private investigation and security courses and use brand ambassador code B as in boy, A as in Adam, 2367. Take a look at investigativeacademy.com. You'll find the link in our show notes. The MO so far seemed to include strangulation, pushing victims off of a bridge, and asphyxiation. The first murders included a firearm, which I never saw anything again with a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, just those initial.
Right. We know that several witnesses have seen some of the victims getting into a blue car. Some people have described the people in the car and the car itself. And we have other trace evidence, including hair. The murders had shaken the Atlanta area, so much the police had curfews put into place for children.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, precautionary,
you can't have anyone out on the street when this is going on.
The FBI was brought in, and over 100 agents were investigating. And just because Atlanta was so overwhelmed. You know, they have their day-to-day crime, let alone this possible serial killer. We're not sure. Finally, a couple saw a man stop at a bridge and throw something into the water, which I'm thinking, why did you do it in front of somebody?
Yeah, they must have been.
I'm glad he did.
Right.
But
must have got a little arrogant.
Yes.
Figured, well, they're not going to catch me.
So police stopped the car on the bridge, and the car described by the couple, you know, they had phoned it in, described the person, described the car.
And the officers probably hauled ass over there.
Yeah. So the suspect they found was Wayne Williams. Police found the final victim's body a few days later, and it made sense. It had floated downstream from where Williams had what they thought threw over the body into the stream. So he had disposed of that decedent on the bridge. The investigators who stopped Williams noticed a 24-inch nylon cord in the car and noted it because it looked similar to marks on some of the victims, which I have to say is very, very good
police work.
Good police work, paying attention to minute detail.
Comes from a good briefing where they've been circulating these photos.
Photos to see the pattern. We're talking about a pattern on a piece of rope, okay?
The ligature.
Yeah, the ligature mark. So also there were carpet fibers that were found at his home because once they got him and they saw the nylon, put two and two together, search warrants for his home. There were carpet fibers found at his home that matched fibers that were found on two of the victims. So that was a direct connection with a really, in some ways, a quick search. It wasn't a quick search finding Williams by any means.
No.
But I think that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
That it was done so quickly, and it was something forensic, because sometimes, people are fascinated with forensics, but they don't realize that sometimes that is the tell-all.
Right, that's the crux.
Yeah. There has to be more to it, but, I like cases that exemplify forensic value. So on June 21st, 1981, Williams was arrested, and he was indicted for the deaths of Carter and Payne. Though there were several links to other murders, the fibers were the strongest piece, and unfortunately they could not tie him to really any.
All of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Though Williams was convicted for the 2 murders, there were still 27 other victims. It's said that possibly the KKK was involved, given the time, the era, given the time, the area of the country, and unfortunately, some people were saying that maybe that was the drive for some of the murders.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that couldn't be substantiated either. There were several claims to these allegations also. which would point out it was Williams committed some of the murders, but he didn't commit all of them. Some of them were driven
the
by...
remaining victims may have been racially motivated killings.
Right.
Which I guess is possible.
It's possible, but I wish they had been able to tie him to more or them to some,
right. Right, because that's just 27 unsolved.
Right.
That are loosely attributed to Williams.
Right. Perhaps, they are part, I don't know how much more evidence they had. The huge thing was the nylon rope.
Right.
The human hair found on Stevens' body, Charles Stevens. Remember, there was dog hair, human hair from a Caucasian.
Mm-hmm. And pubic hair.
Mm-hmm. That had all been tested, and though it's not conclusive that the hair belongs to Williams, Williams would not be the Caucasian contributor.
Right.
But we did have a witness that said there were two men.
Mm-hmm.
So that could have been the accomplice.
Right, he may have had an unknown accomplice.
But Williams was not eliminated, so possibly the pubic hair. I'm not sure.
It may have been his, but they couldn't say that it wasn't.
Right, which to me is still helpful. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate they couldn't find the Caucasian
or directly tie that to him.
Yeah. There is some comfort in knowing Williams is behind bars to this day, but it is very unfortunate that more of the murders couldn't be solved. There's 27 victims that loosely are connected to one murder or another.
The different MOs and all.
Right.
And the different ways of disposing the
Right,
bodies.
which makes me think, was Williams trying to change it up to
throw them off
throw them off, or was there a copycat? Was there somebody falling in line? Because it's not common to have that many murders, especially with children, in the span of 2 years in the same area.
Right.
So there has to be...
is nuts.
Right. There has to be two or more. There has to be a copycat, or he was trying to throw them off himself.
Right. He was so active, he was switching his style to throw off investigators.
FBI profilers think that Williams did in fact kill more of the young victims, but perhaps not all of them. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the profilers that work the case, those are the statements that I found, that they, they're not sure he's connected to all of them, but they're pretty sure he's connected to more than just the two. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why the method of killing and type of victim changed slightly. Over the years, more evidence has been taken out to be retested, and I'm hoping that down the line, more of the cases will be solved. Technology for DNA testing and other forensic testing is advancing all the time. Yes. So I'm really hoping that they will take some of these out, retest them, and possibly link more to Williams or find another killer who has never been brought to justice.
Williams kind of took the fall for.
Right. Williams is serving a life sentence, and I don't think that's going to change. So, unfortunately, that one didn't have very many solves.
Right.
But
for the number of victims, the conclusion was only 2 guaranteed solved.
Right. But because it is a pretty high-profile, infamous case, I'm very hopeful that they'll open something and see what else they can find, especially in today's ability, technological abilities.
And speaking of technological ability, for early 1980s, to match carpet fiber found on the victims to his home.
Yeah. People don't do that today.
He must have been, that's really...
People don't do that really now.
Good. I mean, I know they were desperate for literally any shred of evidence, but that is very, very good work.
Yeah. So I'm really hoping, because that was such a minute detail that connected Williams, I'm really hoping there's other evidence they collected that could bring either, Williams,
tie him to the rest.
Tie him to more, or I still kind of think there's another killer that was never brought to justice.
Wouldn't be surprised if there was more than one child killer active at the same time.
Right. Because that would be the time, unfortunately, but thinking as a crook, that would be the time
to do that
kind of thing, as twisted and horrible as that sounds. Mm-hmm. So, but sometimes you need to think like the killer to catch them.
Exactly.
So thank you for listening, and next time we will probably still have a tragedy to talk about, but
Yes.
maybe it won't be quite so dismal. But as I wanted to bring this one out just because I have heard of Wayne Williams, but I had not heard all of the victims' names. So
Yes.
at the very least, we need to acknowledge who those people were.
Yes, absolutely. So please sign the crime scene log on the way out. Join us again next time. And for now, so long.
Stay safe.
Due to the array of duties officers must carry out, comfortable, reliable footwear is paramount, and not just any old boot will do. Officers must be able to count on their boots to appear professional and perform at a high level regardless of the task at hand. 511's 8-inch AT AR670-1 boots meet all of these neat criteria and more. Featuring the all-terrain load assistance system as well as ortholite footbeds, you'll know the meaning of the word comfort each time you put them on. This soft padding allows officers to endure long shifts without fatigue, sweat, or discomfort. You'll also find the added confidence in your step not only because of the sharp appearance of these boots, but because of the highly adaptive soles. Slip-resistant and traction-focused, the AR6701 boots are designed to help you go anywhere you need to with ease. Additionally, these boots are compliant with U.S. Army uniform regulations. I've worn 511 AT boots for years, and can tell you from experience they will never disappoint. Get your AR670-1 boots or any other high-quality AT boots from 511 today.